All right, everybody, welcome back in. It is the Rob and Stu Show. Rob, of course, out there in Costa Rica this week. He's looking for some offensive linemen for Rutgers. They need it. So God bless, Godspeed to him on his vacay. Here, Pulse Sports Network. Log in to wherever you're at, YouTube, Twitter, like and subscribe, that whole deal. Our guest today, he knows a lot about the like subscribe deal, that model. He is Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles, available wherever you get your fine podcasts. Connor, always a pleasure to talk to you, man. And like I said before, I owe you a beer. April 23rd, let's make good on it. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, and I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I'm definitely in the works of what's my first game going to be, because I live not too far from Camden Yards.
Is it not opening day?
So for me, here is a change that in my life I have moved into working the 9 to 5, and so opening day becomes a little tougher. But I'm thinking game 2 of the year will probably be my first appearance at the Yard.
All right, I dig it. I can understand it, because my boss is a lifelong Orioles guy, and he was like, before single game tickets went on sale, he was talking to me. I think I'm going to take the day off for opening day, and then he saw the prices of what even the upper deck tickets are for opening day, and he's like, you know what? We'll just wait for another game during the week.
Yeah, it's the Yankees in town as well, so that doesn't help those prices.
Does not help. But hopefully an O's victory, because this team, and we talked about it last summer on this program, where they were really exciting last year. But after we talked, Gunnar Henderson, a.k.a. the baby Jesus of Major League Baseball, he gets promoted. Grayson Rodriguez coming off, surgery and everything. He's inching closer to being healthy. You get a second year of Adley Rutschman. You get a lot of hope when you go through this lineup. Again, I mean, it's very hopeful. Where do you sit coming into the season with the O's? Because I can tell you, a lot of people that I talk to that love baseball, this is really the interesting, exciting team in baseball.
Yeah, the Orioles are I think testing fans this year, because it's hard to not be excited when you add 31 wins, when you go from 52 wins in 2021 to 83 in 2022, when you're really additions to the team where you just called up some of your top prospects and then your current guys just got a little bit better. I mean, that's really what happened. And so the Orioles are kind of testing everyone, because they did that, and it's basically the same plan. The free agents they brought in are a little bit better than the free agents they brought in last offseason, but they didn't spend a lot of money. So it was like, we trust that once again, everybody will get better and more prospects will come up and play well. Like, you mentioned Gunnar Henderson did, and Adley Rutschman did, and DL Hall did at the end of the season. And so it's a lot of excitement, because I think no matter what happens, the O's are, at least for a chunk of the year, going to be in the race, which is something we haven't expected since probably 2017 going into a season in Baltimore. But it's the other hand of like the little worry in the back of your mind that the Orioles clearly played over their skis last year. Like, yes, they had some players put up together some great seasons, but they played over their skis. And you see the projections of the win totals, and you see how little they did in the offseason. You say, okay, these rookies are going to get better. They're going to bring up more young guys. They've got so much talent. But you get a little worried, like, I could list off 10 guys that may have had a career season in 2022. So you get a little worried, like, even if they all just take one small step back, is this team going to be like a more frustrating 77-win team than the exciting 83-win team they were last year? And it's such the back and forth, because then you say, wait a minute, but we'll get a full season of Adley Rutschman and a full season of Gunnar Henderson and a full season of Grayson Rodriguez. And how could that be bad? So I am optimistic. I wouldn't say cautiously optimistic, because I don't have giant expectations. I'm not going to get my heart broken if the O's win 79 games this year, but it's a nice excitement of like, you know what? They don't have the expectations yet, but they have the excitement. And I think that's a nice in between for a fan base.
You mentioned the free agency, and I thought it was and I'll share the opinion. Bringing in a Cole Irvin, nice player, but when and Bassett, it's not like earth shattering. You've made the point online on Twitter, a good follow, Locked On Orioles, great follow. If you're a baseball fan, that these guys are meant to be a lot better than what we've seen in the past few years. Guys that are going to be stalwarts, that they're not going to give you a 2.7 ERA, but they'll give you 3.9, 4.1. They're going to eat up innings. They're going to give you good starts, good quality, solid starts to help out this bullpen, which is actually it's a pretty damn good bullpen. Is that enough in your estimation to maybe give some hope that 83 is eclipsable?
Yeah, I think, the best thing about the Kyle Gibson and the Cole Irvin acquisitions this offseason is that they raised the floor for the Orioles starting pitching staff, because even if Kyle Gibson isn't amazing, and even if Cole Irvin is just what he's been the last 2 years with the Oakland Athletics, you're getting two guys who you can, unless they get injured, which they haven't done the last couple of years, who you can count on making 30 plus starts each. And that's why, Mike Elias has said that he's already penciled in Irvin and Gibson into the rotation. He says he won't commit, him and Brandon Hyde won't commit to any of the other three starters. But he said, listen, these were our two major league acquisitions. They're guys who make 30 plus starts a year. They are average to slightly above average, in those innings, and they throw 180 plus innings. And it gives you a nice floor to where you look at the rest of the rotation. You say Dean Kramer had an amazing year, but he was also a disaster in 2021. So you don't still know what he's exactly going to be. Kyle Bradish, amazing finish to last year, was also kind of bad in the first half before he got injured. So you don't quite know. Last year was his rookie year. Grayson Rodriguez, number 2 pitching prospect in baseball, but he's never thrown a pitch in the big league. So you still don't know. You can't put all your eggs in the Rodriguez basket, at least in 2023. And then you have some other guys like Tyler Wells, who's been injured, and Austin Voth, who was really bad with the Nationals for a while before figuring it out in Baltimore. So they've got depth, but it's not, stellar depth. It's just they have a lot more bodies that have thrown solid major league innings than they've had in a long time, which is good. And I think it helps you out. And what it does is it raises the floor. So I do think if the bottom falls out of any of these young Orioles pitchers, which could happen, and it doesn't even mean they're done for good, it just might mean Kyle Bradish might take a step back this year. That's okay. He's a second-year pitcher. I think they're more ready to fill in for that. But on the flip side, they didn't do anything to raise the ceiling either. There's not this ceiling of the guys they brought in where Cole Irvin, as you said, is not going to pitch to a 2.7 ERA. That's just not who he is. So if the floor can be raised, then yeah, maybe they could win 85 games instead. But unless they're making a deal at the deadline to bring in an ace, I don't know if the staff has taken them to 90 plus wins. So I think it was more insurance policies, and they were good insurance policies that they brought in. But it's funny, you look at the Orioles, and without John Means, because he's still recovering from Tommy John surgery.
Who is, in my estimation, I think John Means, a healthy John Means, is an ace.
Yes, but that's the issue. I cover this team pretty closely and watch these games and follow this team. I do not know who's going to start opening day because they just don't have even a semi-clear choice right now. So I think that's the issue. I think the floor has been raised. But you look at they have 12 starters basically right now competing for 5 spots. And you look at all 12 and you say, would I feel good about any of them being named the opening day starter? I'm not quite sure.
Well, Bowie is about to be a cinch for the AAA title this year, folks. Get your bets in on Bowie, the Bay Sox. But I'll ask you this, because we talked about it last year. You saw some of the issues. You called it middle of last year. Hey, this is the last year we're going to have Trey Mancini. We love him. He's great. But we got guys that are just going to have to eat up his time because we can't do anything about it. they have a ton of position players. They have, like you mentioned, a ton of guys who might be fourth or fifth starters on other teams. A lot of depth, a lot of talent, a lot of trade bait. Do you see that being able to be packaged enough for a serious player, or do you see them making incremental moves here and there to get more prospects to just add more to the well that they have?
I think they should make a big move. And I think, as John Angelos has showed, they're not ready to spend any money. So if it's going to be an impact player, it's going to have to be from a trade. And they have a consensus top 5 system, and many outlets have them as the number 1 farm system in baseball right now, which means
I think it's pretty fair to call them the number 1 system.
And they have players to trade, and especially hitters to trade. Like, I talked a little bit about this on Monday's episode of Locked On Orioles. I did a mailbag and got a question about all the infield prospects the Orioles have, because they've only traded one of them. It was Darryl Hernaiz, who they traded to the Athletics for Cole Irvin this offseason. And Hernaiz was probably like the 7th or 8th best infield prospect they had. He probably wasn't going to have a lane to the major leagues anyway. So they have all those prospects. Plus, they have guys currently in the big leagues, Jorge Mateo, Ramon Arias, Taron Vavra, Adam Frazier, who are still big league players and are going to help this team on the roster this year. At some point, something's got to give, because you can't just hold on to these guys. Like, if someone like Connor Norby, who's, a fringe top 10 prospect for the Orioles, second baseman, big power, he's going to be in AAA this year and is going to be knocking on the door. If he doesn't get to the big leagues this year, that's okay. But if you don't plan to bring him to the big leagues in 2024, there's no use just holding him in AAA when you have that many good infielders. I mean, you got to at least capitalize on it. And when you look at your team and you say, you know what, we've got a bunch of 3, 4, and 5 starters, but to win some playoff series, you probably got to have a number 1 starter. I just think they have to start packaging some of those infielders and pair up with a team who's willing to trade a starter and needs, major league ready infield prospects, and just make the deal. I think if it is a big deal, it'll be for a starting pitcher. I don't see them going big for a hitter in a trade, just because all the hitters they have in the system. And I know people yell out the name Corbin Burns again and again, because it really does seem like the Brewers are going to trade him, especially after that whole arbitration fiasco. And I would love that. I just don't know if the O's, they're kind of in between, where they should trade guys, but they're not quite ready to trade these guys for big league talent, but they're also ready to win. So usually it lines up that when you're ready to win, you trade your prospects. But the O's aren't quite doing that. So there's going to come to a tipping point where these hitters are ready to go to the big leagues, and the O's just don't have anywhere to put them. And I think by the end of this season, they're going to have to start making decisions. And so they'll have the prospects to do it. It's just about, do they really let go of some of these guys and pull the trigger?
I wonder, do you get the sense from the ownership and the general manager for the O's that they're much more into the hoarding of talent than they are to, sending talent out? Is it just amassing pieces in a farm system? We don't know what they're going to be, so we can't exactly value them. Or is it just that the right deal hasn't come along? Because I have to imagine you're locked in, pardon the pun, with some of these beat writers and some of the background dealings that are going on. I mean, I can remember with our Tigers, we had a deal in place for Gleyber Torres, but we didn't want to trade away, Michael Fulmer. Right. That's a part of a reason why we're a dumpster fire. But from like your perspective, is it one way or the other? Is ownership and the GM hindering progress by trying to stay stagnant, by being too cautious?
I think the one thing to know is this has actually come out lately in Evan Drellick's book, Winning Fixes Everything, where he did kind of the deep dive about the Astros and the cheating scandal and everything about his book that came out a couple weeks ago. And a lot of the talk I've heard about the book as it pertains to the Orioles, because a lot of the O's executives came over from the Astros, who were hired to run this team, is that a point of pride for them in Houston, and you would assume now in Baltimore as well, is that they want to make it a point to be like, we built this ourselves. So when they go finally get a playoff team and finally get a contender, they want it to be, it seems like, mostly guys who they have either drafted and developed or acquired as young prospects and then developed into big leaguers. And I think that's where we're at, because even though the O's made the trade I mentioned earlier, Darryl Hernandez for Cole Irvin, it was the first time really they had sent a prospect, a legitimate prospect, to another team for a legitimate big leaguer since they started this rebuild. It was a nice flip of the script, oh, they're actually acquiring major league talent. But that still wasn't a guy who, everybody was penciling in to be a major leaguer at some point down the line in Darryl Hernandez. He was more of a 50-50 case whether or not he'll be a good big leaguer someday. And I think they really just want to see this out with all these guys until they can't. Like I mentioned the infielders earlier, Ramon Arias, Jorge Mateo, Adam Frazier, at the major league level right now. I think if Mike Elias and his staff had their way, they might just play out those guys this year in the big leagues and then, not re-sign those guys or trade those guys next offseason to get, maybe some bullpen help or something, or maybe get more prospects, and then just call up the wave of infielders who are going to be big league ready. Because there's a point of pride with this group about we want to build it fully from within, and they're going to add to the margins in free agency, but I don't know if they're going to add big time in free agency. And the stars on this team, if they get good, really good, playoff good, I think are all going to be in-house guys. And it could work out because the O's have developed so well and they've drafted so well and they've got the number one system. But there's never really been a team that's focused fully on interior talent for their stars that has won a World Series. I mean, even those Astros teams that have won, brought in the Verlanders and the Zach Greinke's and the Garrett Coles of the world, to come in and help them from the outside, even though they were very much built. And the Chicago Cubs were very built from the inside, but they still went out and, traded for Jake Arrieta to help that team, and still went out and got John Lester to help that team. I don't know if the O's are going to do that. They might even take it to the extra mile. And so their development's so good that I think, maybe it could work, but it does worry me.
Last question before we move on to the rest of the AL East and get your thoughts. Last year, you were talking about, hey, Gunnar Henderson is the guy coming up. And I thought he really did a nice job when he showed up to the big leagues and showed that everything his stark rise in the minors was not an aberration. Thank you for that, by the way. I got 50 of his rookie cards. I'm nice. Cashing in. Thank you. This year coming up, who's the young guy that might make this team, or we might see for the O's this season? I'm thinking for my fantasy baseball friends out there. You nerds, who's the guy that you think that might really show up and do something big for this team?
I think the easy answer is Grayson Rodriguez, just because I think most people believe he's going to be in the opening day rotation. I believe that as well. Now, he's never thrown a major league pitch. He should have last year, but he came down with that lat injury in June. He was honestly pretty close to getting called up. I think he would have been called up in July.
Now he's fully healed though, correct? He's ish.
He's good. I think he's good. I think everybody thinks he's good. So I think he's going to be ready for opening day. I think he's going to be in the rotation. And I really do think the Orioles have a chance to do what the Braves did last year, which is have a hitter and a pitcher finish number 1 and 2 in the Rookie of the Year voting. When the Braves had Michael Harris and Spencer Strider finish 1-2, they could legitimately have, because Henderson is still rookie eligible, could legitimately have Gunnar Henderson finish first and Grayson Rodriguez finish second in American League Rookie of the Year voting. So that's the guy. But I think everybody's on Grayson Rodriguez, and kind of knowing that even if he doesn't start the year in the rotation, by May, he's going to be there. And, for fantasy purposes, I have him on my dynasty team. I'm ready to just let him loose here in 2023. But I think a different name, I would look out for Joey Ortiz this year. Shortstop, impeccable glove. And it was always a question about the bat. He always had a major league glove, 4th round pick in 2019, always had a big league glove. But he made an adjustment with his stance and where he puts his hands about midway through last year. And he just dominated double and triple A in the second half of the season last year. Just unbelievable offensive stats. The Orioles added him to the 40-man roster this offseason, so he can pretty easily be called up. And if Jorge Mateo, who's going to be the starting shortstop with Gunnar Henderson at third, if Mateo continues to struggle at the plate, I mean, his defense is good. He steals 35 bases. But if he continues to struggle at the plate, you've got a younger and, frankly, for the Orioles' sake, cheaper option in Joey Ortiz, who probably has the same floor as Jorge Mateo, but has a higher ceiling as a hitter. And by June, if Mateo's not cutting it and he's hitting around 200 again, you could see Joey Ortiz take over at shortstop, and he'll probably bat ninth for a while. But if those offensive adjustments are for real, you're looking at like a 10-year big league starting shortstop. Maybe never a guy who hits third or fourth, but a guy who produces and plays great defense and could be, you're looking for a hitter on the waiver wire because there's an injury in the middle of your season. Joey Ortiz could be that guy.
Hey, a 250 hitter hitting eighth or ninth. That sounds like a winning proposition. I want to turn our attention to the rest of the AL East. And I've got some odds for you. Just tell me if this sounds right. Baltimore, no offense. Boston, plus 2,000. Rays, plus 350. Blue Jays, plus 200. Yanks, plus 100. Let's start with the Red Sox. My friend Matt Bernier last week, FanDuel Sports TV. Go check him out. We talked in depth about the Red Sox. Clearly rebuilding. Clearly, just committed to restructuring the entire farm system and the lineup. What's your thoughts on the Red Sox coming into this year?
Yeah, I think restructuring is a better word than rebuilding for them, because when you think rebuilding, you think they're completely tearing down the major league roster. And that's not quite what they've done, because they did, commit a lot of money to Rafael Devers. They did sign a good amount of free agents. Now, I wouldn't say they truly signed like an impact free agent, but they brought in a lot of big leaguers this offseason. They completely revamped the bullpen with kind of Kenley Jansen being the number one guy.
Yeah.
I just think, and I don't know if you agree, I think they feel like the most perfect 500 baseball team of all time. I think that's what's coming up this year. I mean, if I had to put a record on the dot, I would say 81-81 for the Red Sox this year. I think they're going to have some good stretches. I think if Chris Sale is healthy, that's certainly going to help them. But I also think, listen, they lost Sander Bogarts, and he was a dominant part of their lineup. Honestly, no one scared me more in that Red Sox lineup after they traded Mookie Betts than Xander Bogaerts when the Orioles played them. And now he's in San Diego. I don't know. I don't think they're going to tank out. Like, I don't think they're going to win 65 games. They got too much talent to do that. But it is a tough division.
You've been up to Fenway, right, Connor?
I have not been to Fenway.
You need to go.
Yes.
You need to go. It's phenomenal.
Before it falls down.
Yeah. I mean, go to Fenway before it falls down. But Fenway and Wrigley, you have to go. But when I was up there last fall, it was a meaningless game against the Rangers. Place is packed. Folks want to see the Red Sox be competitive, have a win. I think that speaks more to satisfying a very rabid fan base, and a 500 season with under the auspice of, like you said, which is a better phrase, maybe restructuring, just trying to get the team in a better place. But we're going to be competitive,
watchable. Yeah,
watchable. I think that speaks to what you're saying.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they're going to get some big wins. They're also going to have some weird losses, and I don't think they'll play into the playoff picture by the time the season ends.
That's fair. The Rays, plus 350. The Rays just always seem, with the new rules in place for MLB, it feels like the Rays are going to cook up some scheme to be ahead of it. How do you feel about the Rays? Because pitching and hitting, it feels like they go in spurts. Either they're hitting the ball really well, or they're not pitching well, or vice versa. What are your thoughts on the Rays coming into this year?
Yeah, I think it'll be nice. They'll be happy to have Tyler Glass now back in that rotation and fully healthy after getting Tommy John. They're going to have Shane McClanahan, who looked like he was going to win the AL Cy Young until he got injured last year. I don't think it's going to be a down Rays year. They always, every 5 or 6 years, they go through like a 1-year dip where they just win 70-something games. And they're like, you know what? we somehow didn't maximize every single random reliever that we brought up to the big leagues and every 5 or 6 years. I don't know if that'll happen this year, but I could see the Rays taking a step back. I can honestly see Tampa not making the playoffs this year. Now, I definitely see them being competitive and being, an 85-ish win team. I'm just not bought in to that team's offense. And I'm always going to buy into the pitching. I am always going to buy into their bullpen because they're going to just find guys from wherever. They're going to walk into the local Subway and they're going to come out with a guy who can pitch to a 2.5 ERA out of the bullpen. Like that's just what the Rays do. I don't know about the offense. It worried me last year at times. They were fairly injured, which, leads to that. But I just don't know. And I still think they'll probably finish third in this division, but I don't know if they're like a lock playoff team like they've been the past couple of years.
What are your thoughts on Wander Franco? Because I know, he's the guy. He's the name. He has been anointed a la Jason Dominguez as the next coming savior of baseball. His rookie, and it's rookie years are rookie years, right? It is what it is. I'm not like blown away. Do you have any early returns on your thoughts on Wander?
Yeah, he's interesting because when you think of a guy who was like a 75 future value prospect at one time and was touching 80 for some people, I think just the fact that he's a little smaller throws people off as well. It's like you expect this guy who's huge and is, going to have this like chiseled body, is going to, play amazing defense and hit 35 homers and bat 320. And that's not exactly the player he is. He's a great player. He's got to stay healthy. Obviously, he missed time with injury last year. And if the Rays are going to give out an 11-year, almost $200 million contract, they got to know certain more than know for certain more than any other team that he is the real deal. So I do trust them in that sense that he's the real deal. I think the injury kind of clouded people's views of him last year because they didn't get to see him as much. And, the Rays still did get to the playoffs without him. I don't know if he's like a perennial MVP candidate, like some people thought he was going to be. I think we'll see him in some all-star games. Most definitely, he's going to be a menace for other AL East teams for years to come. But I do think his standing as like the next star has definitely taken at least a step back.
Fair enough. Let's get to the Blue Jays and Yankees. It seems like these two consensus-wise are going to be vying for the AL East. For the love of Jesus, can the Blue Jays just take out the Yankees this year? And with the Yankees, I don't know. I feel like this is the same team we've seen the last 7 years, pretty much. And the Blue Jays, again, it still feels like that youth movement, and they've leveraged. I feel like they're fully leveraged against their farm system to just win now. What are your thoughts on the two?
Yeah, for the Blue Jays to start, I mean, this is a team I picked to go to the World Series last year.
Yep.
And of course, they made the postseason finally and had that just awful collapse in game 2 against Seattle in the wild card round and got knocked out. And that really showed what their weakness was last year. And it was that bullpen. And yeah, they had some good arms in the back. Jordan Romano is a great closer, but they did not have those just like solid middle relief arms that you can turn to at any time to get you 3 outs in the 6th inning. Because sometimes you need 3 outs in the 9th, but sometimes you just really need 3 outs in the 6th. And the Blue Jays didn't seem to have that. They had some injuries. Their starting pitching was up and down. I mean, Alek Manoah was great and Kevin Gausman was great, but
Manoah's scary. He's scary good.
Yeah. They had to rely on too much, Yusei Kikuchi, and he was not very good, and too much like Mitch White last year. And it was a lot of Ross Stripling, although he had a solid year, but he's gone. They have upgraded the pitching, and I think Hyun-Jin Ryu will be back this year from injury as well. And that offense is just, it's scary. It's a scary, scary offense. They're going to be in the postseason again. I just don't trust the pitching, the back end of the rotation and the bullpen enough to think that they can, 1, overtake the Yankees, and 2, make a deep playoff run at this point. I got burned by that last year, and I'm going to step back on that. For the Yankees, it's funny because people say they got Aaron Judge back. That was their number 1 goal. And for a while, it was like, well, wait a minute. They got Aaron Judge back, but aren't they kind of the same team once they get Aaron Judge back? Now, the big thing they did, of course, was also sign Carlos Rodon. That took them to, okay, this roster looks a little bit better. Because when you're showing up with Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez, if he can be what he's been, and Luis Severino, if he can stay healthy, that's a pretty good top four. Now, Frankie Montas is getting surgery which hurts their rotation, but that top four is dynamite. Their bullpen's going to be great. It's going to be better now that they finally got rid of Aroldis Chapman. And that offense with Judge, I mean, he's not going to hit 61 homers again, but he might hit 50. And they do have a couple holes. What I see from the Yankees and Blue Jays is I think they're both locks to make the playoffs. One will win the division. The other will finish second and get a wild card. I don't think either of them are World Series winning teams this year. I just think the Yankees have weird holes at shortstop and left field that they didn't really address. And the Blue Jays have those holes in the bullpen, which I just don't think they really addressed. And I just think you look around the league and the Astros are just so much more of a complete team than those two are that, yeah, they could get to the World Series, but they do have some weaknesses.
Let's finish up with a speed round. I'll give you a few questions and a few numbers. You give me your thoughts here. First question, how many teams from the AL East make the playoffs?
I'm going to be a homer, and I'm going to say 3. I'm going to say New York, Toronto, and Baltimore.
You would hate to see it. Hate to see it. All right, over under Blue Jays 92.5.
I'm going to think the Blue Jays and Yankees each have great regular seasons, so I'm going to say the Blue Jays over, but still don't win the division.
All right. Rays 88.5 over under.
I'll take the under. I think it might be a little bit of a dip Rays year.
The Yankees 95.5.
I'll go over. I think we could see something like the Yankees at 98 and the Blue Jays at 94 in this division.
For folks to know, the Yankees plus 100 to go over 95.5, and the Blue Jays minus 106 to go over. So Vegas early season disagreeing slightly with you. The Red Sox over under. Now this is even 77.5.
I guess I'll stick with my 81 and 81 prediction. So I'll go over the 77.5.
All right. And finally, your future AL East champion, Baltimore Orioles over under 77.5.
Yeah, I got to hammer the over on that one. I mean, just for the homerism of it all. And I do legitimately think they'll go over as well.
Now, just for, giggles and fun, my Tigers over under 12. Your thoughts?
Well, they have the record, right, for least wins. And it was what?
How dare you? How dare you,
something?
Connor? Wow.
Now, I will say what benefits the Tigers is who's really trying in that division. They're just going to get wins because who's putting their best foot forward?
I don't. Have you seen what this lineup is? This is reminiscent of Damian Easley at second base. Okay, it's Bobby Higginson in right field. It's not great, folks. So I'm going to take an under 12 for you. That's a great pick. Connor, where can the good folks find you this season if they want to get in touch with the funnest team in baseball and you do the best show covering that team? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so the podcast is Locked On Orioles. It's the only daily O's podcast out there. So we're basically in in-season mode now. So we've got 5 episodes a week, every day, Monday through Friday, posted in the morning, wherever you get your podcast. We're also on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Again, 5 days a week. Got other content on our Twitter page at Locked On Orioles as well. And, excitement is building. We're still about a month away from opening day, but excitement is building. Excitement building from the fans, from people who listen and watch the podcast. And, unless the O's really, really take a step back, it's going to be a very fun season.
No, I'm excited. I'm hoping to go to a few games, probably owe you a few beers. So we'll meet up hopefully a few times this year. Hope to have you back in a month or two and we can chat on early thoughts on baseball and get some of that stuff going. Locked On Orioles is a podcast. Check it out, folks. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, and we will see you after a while.